So, after 59 years, 25 official films, 3 unofficial films, and 6 official actors to have played the character of James Bond, No Time to Die does something that none of these films have done. James Bond dies. It's a spoiler review and you clicked on it. And you've probably already seen the film. Ladies and gentlemen, James Bond is dead. Welcome to my spoiler review of it. It feels so weird to think that that man who was strapped to an iron table with a laser making a beeline for his crotch would die by a bombardment of missiles sent from his own navy. But hey, I guess they created Bond, they've got to destroy him. Hi guys, I'm Tyrone Hamilton. Welcome to the Young Cynics YouTube channels. And this is my spoiler-filled review of No Time to Die. A film that I'm very much processing at this very moment. Just trying to figure out what I really feel about it. But I think I have got a more concrete understanding of my exact opinions of it. I've got a small rundown I've listed here. First I'll go through the plot and how I thought it progressed and the characters, and then at the end I'll just kind of summarize my thoughts on it. Spoiler filled. I already told you he dies. We'll get to that. And my thoughts on not so much that it happened, but the execution surrounding it. So, No Time to Die. Let's go straight in. The start was fantastic, I thought. It was honestly one of the best Bond pre-title sequences. It's very long. Similar to, say, how The World Is Not Enough did feel like it had... it felt like there was a point where there was a moment where it was going to start off, and then, you know, we added a whole boat chase to it, and similar to this, we added an entire car chase. But the start felt great. So this was, of course, the recreation of the story that Madeline tells Bond in Spectre when they were on the train. That a man came to her house and killed her mother when she was very young, and this is what ended up giving her that killer instinct and really letting her know that her parents are in a sort of dark business. However, that sort of changed, and we learned that it wasn't Blofeld as it was kind of implicated in Spectre. It was actually Rami Malek's Safin wearing a kabuki mask. I don't know. Tweet at me if that's wrong. But I thought that was great. It's right out of a horror movie. There was this real sense of dread. The cinematography was fantastic. It was really tense. Of course, a little, I guess I'm just going to call it a Tamagotchi device, goes off when he's stalking her. It's kind of like a Michael Myers scene or something. And then when she runs out into the ice and, you know, you see that bit of humanity come through when he shoots the glass around her to free her. And then we cut away. But it was an absolutely fantastic scene and a great way to start the film and really get you into it. Now, we cut to Bond in Italy. So, one thing you notice straight up, so as he's driving the DB5 through Matera in Italy, I'm sure I haven't pronounced that right, but we hear Louis Armstrong's All the Time in the World from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And now, this is where I think if you saw my non-spoiler review, I feel like if you're a James Bond fan, the idea of Madeline being the one who he falls in love with is, to me, as someone who has watched the evolution of this franchise and seen, you know, what it takes for Bond to really fall in love with a woman and really let his guard down, you know that Madeline Swan is, as a character, is just typically not the sort of character to do that. I mean, I consider her to be a very sort of bland and underwritten character. As much as I love Lea Seydoux, it just doesn't translate as, you know, she's the one who breaks through, because the chemistry, and unfortunately in this movie as well, it's just still not there. They're very cold towards each other in a lot of the movie. Even in these early scenes, it still feels like they are guarding each other, and there's still a lot that they're not telling each other. But we see that they're enjoying life. They go to a hotel, and then the next morning, Bond goes to Vesper's grave, just to remind you that that was a woman that Bond fell in love with, and it was more believable than Madeline. And then, of course, bomb goes off in his face, and then we get a car chase, motorbike chase, the stunt work, everything about this scene. I love this. It was intense. It had that grit and I guess sort of intensity that Spectre's action scenes were really lacking, and they really fixed this. There were some great moments of little moments where he's stuck in the and he's surrounded, or when he jumps off the bridge. That was fantastic, and you really feel those hits that he takes. And then in the end, of course, he ditches Madeline at the station, gets on the puts her on a train, and walks away. And then we get the opening credit scene. I thought it was I liked it. There were some nice little homages to, of course, the dots from Dr. No, and there was the little trident from or whatever it was from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and sort of the color sheets that went on the page. I thought they were really well done. So then we cut 5 years later. So now we are really introduced to the main sort of villain plot of the film. So Heracles is a sort of bioweapon which is being engineered, and it is engineered to target specific DNA strands. So we're going for the one that comes to mind when I think of bioweapon is always On Her Majesty's Secret Service, how he's got the girls who are, designed to be immune. However, they can carry that disease to their continent or ethnic region to be able to spread it, and that's kind of Blofeld's whole plot in that movie. So right off the bat, we can feel that we are going for it is a different type of Bond, especially contrasting to Craig and how it's been very sort of grounded in sort of this reality. The villain goals of Casino Royale was winning to finance terrorism. Quantum of Solace was that sort of a continuation of that, as it led in from Casino Royale. Only we were learning about Le Chiffre's bosses. Skyfall was a vendetta, and Spectre was about surveillance. But with this one, it is very much that campy sort of 60s style of Bond, which, I'll be interested to see what regular audiences think about that sort of plot. And then, of course, because it's been 5 years, we learned that Bond is in Jamaica and he has left. And I just love these little scenes of our hero who's, he's taken some time off to go and, rediscover himself, and be a bit of a hermit in that situation, go out to a nightclub every now and then, meets up with Felix Leiter and his buddy Ash, played by Billy Magnuson. And fun little scenes where they're trying to get him back in the game. However, and then we meet Nomi, who is the new 007, played by Lashana Lynch. I thought she was terrific in this film. I know that there are idiots online who are going to get outraged just because a black woman is now 007. She was a really interesting character. You were a little bit annoyed. She was a little bit annoying as why she was trying to undermine 007, but you kind of felt like it was part of her personality because I guess of just simply that, he's coming back and she wants to cultivate the 007 on her own without having this guy come back and trying to relive the glory days or whatever. But I thought she was fantastic. Gives him a warning about coming back. And then we get this action scene when Bond teams up with Leiter and CIA to go and infiltrate a Spectre meeting. And this is where we are introduced to Paloma, played by Ana de Armas. And I wish she was in this movie more, because she, right off the bat, charismatic, funny. She's like an agent of, she says 3 weeks training, and that's kind of her little in-joke. And then they go in, they've got their little earpieces, and they kind of find the frequency, and they find that Blofeld's running this whole entire meeting from within his jail cell, with the use of something that we will get to later. But then a flashlight comes on Bond, and as these little specks fall from the sky, it's like a disease, and then everyone else in the club starts to fall. And we learnt that Spectre has some enemies of their own outside of the good guys, I guess, and a bunch of Spectre agents start falling dead. And we found out that Obrishev, who was in that opening scene, he is a agent on behalf of Safin, Rami Malek's villain. So this was I love this scene. The action, the fighting, I guess, the way that the camera held and let the action really breathe was so cool. Like the weird sort of like domino effects, and the way it almost played out like a spy versus spy with Nomi and Bond trying to get the guy out. That was really cool. It added like 3 sort of layers to that scene. And the action was fantastic. Ana de Armas' stunt work was really cool as well. And just her character, she was really innovative as well. And then they take off. However, it's revealed that Ash, Billy Magnuson, is a sleeper agent for either Spectre or Safin. I think it was Safin. And he is able to kill Leiter, drowns him, shoots him in the boat, and Bond is able to escape with his life. And then this, of course, is kind of like the crux to get Bond back into service. So, I mean, 5 years away from the service. It's, I wish they'd explored it a bit more. Because unfortunately, given that it's just a cut, it really doesn't, you don't feel that sort of effect of 5 years. Bond comes back after 5 years and he hasn't missed a beat. It's unlike, say, something like Skyfall, where he misses out on that time, but you see that it takes a long time for him to really get back in the swing, because he's mentally and physical just ruined after the events of what happened in the pre-credit scene in that movie. However, we'll get back to this one. So then we get an introduction of Safin. So we learn that Blofeld's psychologist is Madeline, and once again, this is an issue that I have, that, her character is thrown into these situations, but unfortunately her personality is so, like, weak in terms of, in this area. Like, the story wants her to do all these things, but I just couldn't get I can't get invested in her character. But we are introduced to Safin, who she doesn't recognize until he shows her the mask. And then, well, Blofeld is introduced. And this is where, for me, the movie started to go downhill. Because as soon as they introduced the majority of the Spectre plot, that was where things got clunky. First off, Blofeld's introduction was campy as all hell. He is slowly lifted on through on a little box, slowly just sitting there as it slowly paces towards Bond. Meanwhile, on the other end, Madeline is freaking out because, well, she doesn't want to kill him because she's been given the infection on her hand. So Bond, however, he's touched her hand. So Bond, after that, quickly goes and he tries to infiltrate, get information out of Blofeld, but to no avail. And then after some taunting and saying that Madeline has secrets, Bond gets pissed off, grabs him by the throat, but then it turns out those toxins that were on his hand were genetically coded to kill Blofeld. Blofeld dies. So probably Christoph Waltz, one of the biggest bouts of potential that these Daniel Craig films have had, he's been wasted. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He was so much potential for a character who just spewed off lazy dialogue, just nonsensical lines. He kept on doing that stupid cuckoo thing, which, like, just annoyed me in the moment. But he's dead. And it had just no emotional weight on the story. Because now that we know that Spectre is just an inept organization that can be taken down by one guy, and that one guy wasn't even Bond. So Bond then goes to Madeline's house, and I'd actually stayed away from spoilers, but I heard rumors about this. We are introduced to Bond's daughter, Matira. I'm just going to call her Matira. And it is bait and switched whether or not she is or isn't Bond's child. However, the blue eyes, which are very heavily emphasized by the sunlight coming in, make it fairly obvious that she is. No matter how much umming and ahhing the movie wants to do, she is. And it was very obvious that it felt like they were like, oh, I don't know, the fans might not be too on board with it. Honestly, as long as it's done well, I can accept it. This one was an idea that just didn't go far enough. They introduced the idea of a daughter, and sure, Bond starts to get emotionally swayed over, but it never has any resonance on him. So then we find out Safin's motivation, that's Blofeld ordered for his family to die, and this has caused him to become, a rogue and want to kill due to a sense of vengeance and wanting to kill Mr. White because he was part of Spectre. So then we get an awesome car chase. This is what unfortunately, for me to get invested in an action scene, I need to be invested in the plot. And at this point, it was tiptoeing, so I was still very much on board with what was going on. But this action scene was fantastic. Just Bond just smoking fools in a forest. It was awesome stuff. And when he kills Billy Magnuson by letting a car crush him, it was great. And the way he strings up the tow cable on the front of the Jeep and lets a motorbike rider falling into it and coat hang himself. Before then, shooting him in the face. Awesome stuff. And then, I was getting interested. Madeline was being cool. She was shooting people, and then Safin just kidnaps them. So, we got to get our third act. So then Bond and 007 infiltrate the case, and so beforehand they're like, oh man, the fans are going to be pissed off, so let's try and get some goodwill. I mean, I didn't have a problem with it, but they just outright gave him back 007, which, I don't know, for me the number doesn't make the man, and I wouldn't have cared either way if they had or hadn't have done it. I guess they did, so good on them. I'm sure someone was happy that they did that. So they infiltrate the base. This was great action. It reminded me of You Only Live Twice, infiltration of the base and that and everything. And it wasn't just the simple smash and dash sort of stuff. There was a lot of cool infiltration. Unfortunately, it was cutting back to Rami Malek, Safin, and he had his little secret garden with all of these toxic plants. And I just think that this character falls short because the motivation simply isn't there, especially for a personal vendetta with Bond. It's been the same with Green, and it's the same with Blofeld. As much as they tried to force that personal, oh, you stole my dad's love or whatever, that fell flat. And this one, while not falling completely flat, it comes close because it just doesn't. It won't hold up. This villain, Safin, he's a guy who has aspirations of mass genocide, but he doesn't add anything to the story. So there was some cool action. There's a great fight in a stairwell. Meanwhile, there was a nice scene where Bond and Safin were talking to each other. Unfortunately, the dialogue was generic. It was generic hero talks to villain. Look at me. I am the man who is going to create the downfall of so many by being a god to them. Oh no, people are good. It was that sort of stuff, which I really couldn't get on board with. And then, well, Bond breaks free, shoots a bunch of people. Safin tries to escape. Bond says, alright, we'll call in the airstrike. I'll get out of here. Just let me fight Safin. So Safin, I think that the reason this movie might not sit so well with me is because, as I'll go into it later, so Safin fights Bond. They have a brief duel in some sort of koi pond. Bond shoots Safin, but that is only after Safin smashes a vial on his hands, which infects him with the Heracles disease, which has been coded for Madeline and Matera, meaning that he can't be with his lover and daughter, meaning that for James, life has no purpose. So he shoots Safin, and, well, he calls up 007, says, "Can I speak to Madeline?" And he says, "I love you," and a bunch of stuff. All while rockets are flying. Me and Adam were sitting in the cinema wondering, are they really gonna kill James Bond? The rockets were flying, and he was standing there, and Hans Zimmer's music was playing, and I was expecting more along the lines of Dark Knight Rises, where you think he dies, but no, those rockets hit the ground, and Bond goes up in a glorious explosion, and I really don't know how to feel. The reason that I am having a hard time processing this is not because it happened. I think under different circumstances I would be fine with this. He goes out in a way which, was effective in a sense. James Bond stands alone after being given news that, he can't be able to live the life he wants. But he's done the deed and saved millions of people, so, it's fine. However, it is the fact that it was this villain, this extremely ineffective, extremely, I guess, I said in my original review, he lacked that presence that Bond villains need. He had a more connection to Bond's love than Bond himself, which is fine, but they only had really one scene together, and they barely had a personal connection. And you feel like for him to be the one to kill James Bond, and this is coming from a fan, it doesn't feel earned. Unfortunately, they did not earn, well, in the villain sense, they did not earn the death of James Bond. And then we move to the love. He is making a heartfelt confession. And I think the reason why Madeline does not work as in the realm of James Bond's One True Love is because her character is not as much a character with a personality as much as she is a plot element. For Blofeld, for Safin, for Mr. White, to get them to do things. And even Bond now. She is not a character who is, funny and smart like Vesper was, or Tracy was. She is a character who has a tortured past, which, cool, much like James. And she is a smart character, or so we're told. However, not enough of what she does is enough to impact the story, apart from throwing tea in a guy's face and shooting a couple of faceless henchmen. It's the fact that we saw James Bond fall in love, and we saw what it took. And it feels like we are, or might be just me, but you feel like you have an attachment to this character, and you know what has worked for them in the past. And the problem is that, as I've said before, the Madeline James love story is not earned, because these characters do not have this. They don't have any chemistry together. They are very bland, plain spoken when they're together. I get that Craig was trying to do more with the character, but when these characters are together, they do not talk in a emotionally resonant or even entertaining way. They just stare at each other, say a lofty line, and then kiss. or they just stare at each other, say one line, and then have an awkward pause. And that just to me is not, that just doesn't make a compelling relationship, and definitely not after 59 years to be the relationship that is what causes James Bond's death. I have no problem with the killing of him. I think it's just the circumstances. It's just they don't feel earned in the moment. So then Maddie and Matera go back to the place at the start of the film. Bond is dead. There's a little MI6 vigil with all of our regulars. And then the film ends to the Louis Armstrong song. And I think I just reliving the film right there. This is a movie that is going to be really interesting on rewatch. Will I love it? Will I like it more? I really hope I do. Will I dislike it more? I don't think so. Because at this moment, I have definitely come to terms with the situation of it, although the circumstances still don't sit quite right with me. And this is me speaking as a fan. I think I've already told you everything I feel as the movie critic in me. However, the James Bond fan in me has a very different set of criteria when I go into a film like this. One thing I was thinking of is a film critic will probably like this movie because it has emotion, it has a world, globe-trotting plot, it has relationships, it has a conceptually interesting villain played by a critical darling, Rami Malek. However, the James Bond fan in me knows this franchise and knows it well, and knows what works about this franchise, and and is familiar with the history. We're familiar with what it takes for certain situations to come around. And the problem is that these last two films, Spectre and No Time to Die, have felt like they are building to something. However, the building blocks are incredibly shaky, and that is that this relationship between Bond and Madeline has been far weaker compared to especially two of Bond's great loves in Tracy and Vesper. Characters who you could really believe, and you really saw them fall in love. They didn't have to kiss for us to know that they were in love. They just had to talk. They just had to communicate. Just had to look at each other. However, in this one, it's just dry and, honestly, unless they were crying, emotionless. But here's the things. I love the action. I love the set design. I love the score. Daniel Craig is fantastic. And I do want to emphasize that I've got to thank Daniel Craig. Because in 2005, I didn't really care about James, or just didn't care about James Bond anymore. Die Another Day had effectively kneecapped the franchise. And what he did, and what him and Martin Campbell did to reinvigorate that franchise to make it massive today is so awesome. They gave Bond another, 20, 30 years on a lifespan that looked like it wouldn't go much further than another 5. So Daniel Craig, thank you for that. Paloma was great. Naomi was great. I like the MI6 characters. Hans Zimmer's score was really good. I think I already said that. I like the Billie Eilish song. It is a little bit too familiar to the last two, but I like it. The stuff I don't like is, I think that the plot didn't flow well enough. And I felt like the characters, the two driving characters, I can say it again, that Safin was a weak villain, Madeline is a weak love interest. And those two are, unfortunately, may mean that the final outcome of this movie feels really unearned. And, yeah, unearned emotion. That's what I'd say about the ending of this film, because I really wanted to get invested, but I wasn't. Because these characters didn't to me anyway, have that emotional resonance. Daniel Craig's Bond, definitely. However, if he was doing it for a different reason, then I would have felt more emotionally invested, instead of just utterly confused, because I didn't get it. Maybe it was just that I am cold and callous, but I refuse to believe that, because I got emotionally invested in his relationship with Vesper and the beings that happen with, Silver and Lashif as great villains. If a villain was written like one of those guys, I'd be more than happy to see them be the one that Bond gives a defiant middle finger to as he dies in a blaze of glory. But I don't know. The fan in me is just not satisfied with how it happened. I'm really interested to see what they do next. I've been sitting on an idea for a Bond film. It's a little bit sort of a mixture of, say, like Kingsman with that training. And the idea would be to reinvigorate it with a much, much younger Bond. And the film would be about earning his 00 status, being that the film would be about like the two kills that he's got to, the two assigned kills that he's got to do to get that number. But yeah, I don't know where we go from here. Daniel Craig's Bond tenure ends in appropriate fashion for me. Where with the movies we've gone great, dull, great, dull, and now we end off with a movie that starts off as great and then ends off as not dull but just confusing. I'm still conflicted when I think about this movie. I think 5 out of 10 is an appropriate score for me because I feel right down the middle on this one. Unfortunately, I feel very similar to the way I did about Rise of Skywalker. Not anymore. I know that Rise of Skywalker is a movie that just fails. But there's just this weird conflict because the movie critic in me sees all of these brilliant technical things and sees a plot that isn't terrible. But as a fan, I look at this film and think James Bond is a character that lives on, and I believe that it's going to live on for quite a few years. However, this film, I think, treats itself or gives itself a grander ending than it earned. This movie sets itself a bar, and as an audience member, you've got to make me care enough so that when you get to that bar, I am ready to accept what happens. As a fan, however, I just didn't feel it with this movie. There are some absolutely top tier Bond things in this movie, but unfortunately, the way it ended is something that I still can't quite process. Not as a you can't kill this character, but the way you do it has to emotionally resonate as a fan for me, and it just didn't, which is unfortunate. The death of James Bond left me more confused than, emotionally fulfilled. But there's my emotional plea, if you will. What did you guys think of No Time to Die? Let me know all of your spoilerific thoughts in the comments below. But I'll see you later, guys. I'm not sure how many more videos I'll do. I kind of just want to have this as a platform to kind of just talk about movies whenever I want to. Alright, see you guys.